So, with the release of Freaky coming out this weekend, we decided to break it down and find all the Easter eggs and references to the popular horror slashers that came before it. If we missed any, be sure to comment down below, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe and ring that bell. There are going to be a lot of spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the movie Freaky, be sure to go check out my spoiler-free review right here. I thought it was fantastic, and go see it. It is now in theaters and will be on video on demand on December 4th. Without any further ado, let's talk about Freaky. Landon and Kennedy want to pay homage to all the horror slasher films that they grew up on, while at the same time including all of the tapestry of John Hughes films that center around high school kids. The film starts on Wednesday the 11th, where four suburban teenagers sit by a fire telling urban legends of the one they call the Blissfield Butcher. One teen says that the murder started back in 1977, while another said that it started in the mid-90s. One teenager makes a claim that the butcher always seems to attack around prom night. However, another teenager seems to correct her and say no, it's always during homecoming.
If they watch prom night, they'd save time. There's a formula to it. A very simple formula!
The one teenager, Isaac, spills beer on his girlfriend, so they go inside to clean it up. Inside the house, they find ancient artifacts because Ginny's father is an art collector. One of them being La Dola, an ancient Mayan dagger from 1438 that's used for human sacrifices.
This kind of looks like your old girlfriend.
Isaac goes exploring throughout the rest of the house, and suddenly he gets attacked by the butcher with a wine bottle, in the same exact way that a teenager was killed in Sorority Row. I should also note that the mask that he uses predominantly throughout the movie is one that he stole from this house as well. Next is Isaac's girlfriend Sandra, who gets killed by having her head repeatedly slammed with a toilet seat. Ouch!
Kicking my ass!
Outside, the other couple, Evan and Ginny, are on the tennis court when BAM! The butcher breaks a tennis racket and jams it into the side of Evan's head. Ginny runs away and is able to hide in a closet that has a secret closet of its own, but then decides to run out into the open when she sees that her absent-minded parents are coming in the driveway. She makes a run for it, but the butcher stops her and impales her on a spear up against a wall. The butcher flees the scene, but not before stealing the dollar that seemed to be calling out to him. The parents find Ginny, and it's very clearly a nod to the opening of the movie's screen. But considering Ginny is impaled up against the wall, it also feels like the classic Michael Myers kill. The following morning, Thursday the 12th, we meet Millie, a typical 17-year-old girl who wakes up in her room that's bright pink and has some posters of decorations, subtly referencing the duality of dichotomy, alluding to the transformation that's going to happen later in the movie. We meet Millie's mom, Paula, played by Katie Finneran, or as a true horror fan might know, Judy Rose in the 1990s zombie horror remake Night of the Living Dead, and Millie's sister Charlene, played by Dana Drury, a small-town cop who is essentially an inverted version of Dewey from the Scream franchise. Both are small-town cops who have a younger sister that goes to the local high school. However, while Dewey has a Barney Fife-ish presence that oozes with inexperience, Charlene is smart, strident, and confident in what she is doing. Both are highly protective of the people that they care about, but after the Scary Movie franchise that kinda made Dewey a joke, I'm kinda glad they kinda did a little fun twist on the character. Millie goes to school where she runs into one of her teachers, Mr. Daniels, played by Alonzo Ward, who you may know as Fred, Calvin Bouchard's nephew in Jaws 3D. Millie also runs into her two best friends, Nyla and Josh, played by Celeste O'Connor and Misha Alshashevich, putting another fresh take on the horror genre. As the black and gay friends, these are typically the characters that die early on in the horror movies.
You're black! I'm gay! We are so dead!
However, here they're main characters that are actually well written. Josh has some of the funniest lines in the movie and is reminiscent of Ducky from Pretty in Pink. He's funny, confident, eccentric, and doesn't care what anyone seems to think. We have skipped over the cliches of the gay friend character coming out of the closet, and have him presented as a fully developed character that knows who and what he is. Also, these two characters, they got the same last name. Coincidence? Perhaps. There's another last name coming up, and that definitely is not. In the next scene, we learn that Millie's father died. It feels very Scream-esque when Nyla tells her that it's been a year and that she has to get over it, but while Billy says it because he's kind of selfish and just wants to get with Sydney, Nyla says it because she wants to make the point that she doesn't want her to miss out on living the best parts of her life. Stupid. We meet the school bullies, Tim and Ryler, who pick on Millie because she's poor and desperately wants to get with the jock that isn't a complete asshole like every other jock in the school? Alright, Pretty in Pink, get in there. Also, Millie's crush is named Booker Strode, which undoubtedly is a reference to Laurie and all the members of the Strode family from the Halloween franchise. Oh, and Millie Kessler is a combination of Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things and the character David Kessler from American Werewolf in London. The sister's character, Charlene, is also the name of Drew Barrymore's character in the movie Firestarter, and Josh's middle name is, wouldn't you know it, Michael! From Halloween. Are we stretching on some of these name references? I don't know, maybe. But then again, if Scream 2 can do it, so can we. Next, we meet Millie's woodshop teacher, Mr. Bernardi, who you may know as Cameron Fry from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he's kind of, well, how do I describe him?
Pardon my French, but you're an asshole. Asshole!
It also appears that the character is very loosely based on Jack Torrance from The Shining. He scolds Millie for being late, first by imitating her, and then reminding her of her responsibilities.
Ever thought about my responsibilities? Moments thought about my responsibilities to my employers? Has it ever occurred to you that I've agreed to look after the Overlook Hotel until May the 1st? Does it matter to you at all? And that I have signed a letter of agreement, a contract, in which I have accepted that responsibility? Has it ever occurred to you what would happen to my future if I were to fail to live up to my responsibilities?
Also, if you look at all the posters behind him on his desk, you'll notice that they're very reminiscent of the opening shots of The Shining, with landscapes and overhead shots with lakes. It's pretty spot on. When she meets up with Nyla and Josh in the theater, the stage is set for a hanging scene. That is clearly a nod to the GALLOWS franchise, in which the spirit of a student haunts a high school because years ago, he was accidentally hanged and killed after a prop malfunction during a presentation of the play. Do you know they made 2 of those movies? 2. Has anyone seen them? Josh tells Nyla and Millie that Rainer was on social media crying over the death of Ginny, but says she's only doing it for the attention, seeing how Ginny hates Rainer ever since she started that rumor about how she got a carrot stuck in her vagina. Which is a callback to Jack Frost, a campy horror film in which the most notorious scene is in which a killer snowman kills Shannon Elizabeth by, well, using a carrot. I didn't write it. Anyway, at the pep rally, there's 3 football players standing side by side to spell out the date 12/4/86, which, if that's a significant date in history, please comment down below. I'll give you a free digital copy, because I couldn't figure it out. The closest I could figure it out to is that it might be one day next to the release date of Critters, but that's it. Nothing really seems to add up, but if you could figure it out, if it's like the birthday of somebody in this movie, I will give you a free digital copy. Comment down below. Anyway, after the homecoming game, Millie is stranded at a parking lot because her mom is drunk drinking a bottle of wine home on the couch. A plot point that we kind of get throughout the movie that she's not dealing very well with the death of the father. Charlene does show up at the house and realizes that Millie hasn't been picked up, so she heads to the high school and tries to call Millie along the way. Unfortunately, Millie's phone dies, and once you know it, she looks across the way and she sees the Butcher, who I gotta say looks just like Jason from Friday the 13th. Vince Vaughn looks very menacing, standing at 6'3". He's stocky, and he's got that mask that looks just like the hockey mask. So he chases Millie across the football field, and right before the Butcher can stab her, the football field opens up to reveal that they are now on top of an ancient pyramid on top of a sacrificial altar. He stabs her in the shoulder, but in doing so realizes that he has also been stabbed in the same exact spot. Charlene shows up and scares off the Butcher with a gunshot, and takes Millie back to the police station instead of the hospital because I guess being stabbed is not that big of a deal? A cop is seen locking up the Butcher's mask and Dola dagger up in an evidence locker, and we also get a look of what appears to be a golden pyramid statue as well. Back at the house, Millie is seen taking a bath. We also notice there's a deleted scene that's not in the movie but is in the trailer where Millie is laying in a bathtub with a washcloth over her face when a hand seems to reach directly in front of her, just like Freddy Krueger did on Nightmare on Elm Street. That night at midnight, the transformation occurs, and the two wake up in very different places, having switched bodies. We get a quick glimpse of the Butcher's hideout, where we see a mannequin head with nails in it, which is a reference to Hellraiser, a seamstress mannequin, which looks just like Buffalo Bill's in Silence of the Lambs, a dead white cat, which special effects master Tony Gardner said was the same exact one that was used in Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. And since Lyndon was listening to a podcast about the Black Dahlia, we even get a dismembered mannequin that resembles her with a Glasgow smile. Millie, now in the Butcher's body, runs away when she sees a homeless man that wants some drugs. And the Butcher, who's now Millie, decides that she wants to actually go to school so that she can kill some of the friends. Of course, she can't go dressed the way that she usually does, so she goes into her sister's closet where she finds a red leather jacket, which the production team said is a direct reference to Grease, in which Sandra Dee has a transformation in the end. But we can't help but notice that this actually looks like the jacket from Michael Jackson's Thriller as well. Upon entering the high school, we hear the song Que Sera Sera, a Doris Day song specifically created and used for the Alfred Hitchcock classic The Man Who Knew Too Much. Versions of the song have appeared on a number of film and television soundtracks, often juxtaposed with dark and disastrous events to create an effective black comedy. For example, in The Simpsons episode Bart's Comet, the song is sung by the citizens of Springfield in anticipation of an impending comet that will wipe out the town and kill them all. Previously, the song was featured over the opening and ending credits of Heathers, a dark teen comedy dealing with murder and suicide.
I love my dead gay son.
The Butcher then kills Rainer after she tells her that she didn't come here to clam jam, by freezing her in the cryo chamber. Millie finds her later that day, but she's a frozen corpse, and she falls over and shatters. An effect we actually haven't seen that much of since the mid-90s.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Anyway, the Butcher goes back to class and she licks the blood off of Booker's finger, really leaning into that Jennifer's body persona. Meanwhile, Millie scares the living hell out of her best friends, but through the power of cheerleading, proves that she is who she says she is.
Shake, bitches.
They research the dagger and realize that La Dola, which means the pain in Spanish, is an ancient Aztecian dagger used in ritual sacrifice. On the dagger it says that if the sacrifice is not successful, the soul of the two persons are swapped, and the change will become permanent after 24 hours. The dagger itself is made of bone with an oxidized bronze blade. The top is half skull and half man with a glimmering jewel in its eye. Beyond that, the writer said the mythology is completely made up. Yes, Aztecians allegedly did perform sacrificial rituals on top of a pyramid, and it's kinda crazy. They were also really into cannibalism and using skulls to scare people away, but for the purpose of this movie, none of that applies. Anyway, Millie gets back at her other bully, Timmy, by intimidating him in the same way that she was always intimidated by him, finally coming into her own and showing that she has just as much backbone as her sister. Meanwhile, the Butcher decides that it'd be fun to cut her teacher in half using a table saw. Funny enough, there aren't actually a lot of horror movies that have done this before. Sure, there have been some TV shows that have used the idea in the past.
Jesus Christ! What was I thinking? That would have hurt like hell!
The Child's Play remake, for example, saw the character briefly fall on top of a table saw, and the franchise called Saw has had a variation of different saws used, but for the side-by-side, we have to go with the 2007 horror film Frontier, in which a woman impales a neo-Nazi by throwing him on top of a table saw, and as expected, it's pretty damn bloody. Finally, Millie and her friends run into the Butcher, but he screams for the cops, and the cops give chase. Also, it should be known that all the cop cars are labeled Blissfield, the safest place on Earth. They go to Discount Bonanza to get away from the cops, and Millie is given an Aaron Rodgers mask to disguise herself, but to be honest, I couldn't help but get like a vibe of Point Break from 1992. Meanwhile, at the haunted mini-golf, the jocks want to have their own homecoming party despite the curfew, so Butcher suggests they have it at the old sawmill, so he can kill them later that night. Then she lures Booker into a big mini-golf section of the arcade, which looks strikingly like the cabin from Evil Dead Part 2. And if you look at the street address on the side of the house, it says, won't you know it, 1313. Butcher is about to kill Booker with a box cutter, but Millie shows up and is able to knock them both out before Butcher can kill anyone and before Booker can call the cops. Nyla, Josh, and Mila take the Butcher and Booker back to Josh's house and try to sort everything out from there. Fun fact, the front door of Josh Detmer's house has the same exact spiderweb-style transom window above the front door as Nancy's house in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Millie tries to explain to Booker what happened with the body switch, but is only able to do so when she recites the poem that she left in his locker called I'm Not Yours. And if that seems like a familiar plot point, it's because they already did this idea in It Chapter 1.
Your hair is winter fire, January embers. My heart burns there too.
And in It 1990.
Why is it so mean?
When Millie, Josh, and Nyla were looking up the address for the police department, it comes up as 226 Bodhun Street. Bodhun is the last name of the film's editor, Ben Bodhun. Also, could we just talk about all the weird motifs to Josh and his mom in the house? Every single wall in that house has a photo of them jumping with little expressions like live, laugh, play. Even on the coffee table, there's a little personally made figurine of the two of them high-fiving. It's a little much. Anyway, the Butcher escapes from the chair and tries to murder Josh and his mom, but they escape by locking themselves in a bedroom. Also, the knife going through the door almost hitting the victim is very much a cliche in most horror movies, such as Scream 2, American Horror Story, Child's Play, and if we're really being honest, it goes all the way back to 1980 with the classic hit, The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
The butcher runs all the way to the police station in an attempt to stop the gang. Millie sees this and runs in to save her sister. Charlene shoots at Millie, thinking it's the butcher. Butcher steals the mythical dagger, and Millie locks Charlene in a holding cell so that they can pursue the butcher. At the sawmill party, the butcher kills 3 of the jocks. One by slitting his throat with a broken bottle, the second by taking a chainsaw to a guy's crotch, and the third by decapitation. The kills are played for laughs more than scares, and it's very reminiscent of, I'd say, more of Ash from Evil Dead than, say, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw. According to DP Laurie Rose, the use of bright pinks behind Millie were inspired by shots from Carrie, It, Spring Breakers, Mandy, and the Neon Demon. Personally, it reminded me of another John Hughes film, Weird Science. Next, she kills Phil using a hook in the same style of Candyman, busting in through a graffiti-covered wall and stabbing him in the eye with a hook. It also reminds me a bit of the fisherman from I Know What You Did Last Summer. Millie and Butcher finally square off, and through the help of her friends, finally are able to hold down the Butcher and switch bodies back just before time runs out. The cops then show up and shoot Butcher multiple times. However, if you know anything about horror movies, if you see a killer in the back of an ambulance, they're probably not dead. Back at Millie's house, the family is hanging out, and you think everything's over, but be warned. The killer always comes back for one last scare. Charlene, Millie, and Paula work together as a team, and Millie manages to use the leg of a chair as a wooden stake, impaling the butcher from behind before kicking it further into him. Very much like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, solidifying the character's arc and finding strength and confidence to stand up for herself. End credits. And that's the story of Freaky. Did we miss anything? Be sure to comment down below if there's any references that you picked up on. I know there's a lot of movies from the 80s that I haven't seen, but if you saw anything, be sure to comment down below. I've been John, you've been Burned. Thank you so much for watching. We're almost at 3,000 subscribers. Be sure to click that bell and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Ow.